Hey everybody, welcome to episode 113 of the Askdap show, where I answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. On this episode, I talk about performance pack differential oil service changes and can you kill yourself by erasing your airbag light?
Rooster P via YouTube says, "Help, Paul. One of the screws fell into the heater box on my Mark V. What do I do?"
All right, so this comment was actually left on a video I talked about installing an RMT 300 radio on a Mark V, and it has a duct that actually comes up that you can drop screws down through while you're during an installation process. So I specifically mentioned make sure you don't do that. Obviously, he made a mistake and actually did that. So the problem is, until you know exactly where the screw has gone, it's hard to say for sure. So a few things. I would start with a magnet. Most technicians would have like a long magnet that extends. You can kind of put it down in there and hopefully the screw would have fallen just somewhere near where you initially dropped it. If you've since been driving the car since then, most likely it's not there anymore. Still worth a shot to give it a shot if you can get a magnet down there. But the next step would be is to try to determine where it is in the box. Maybe, try to rattle it around or shake the car a little bit while you're underneath the dashboard. Have a friend help you track down where you think the screw is and then determine if you can get in there. So those boxes are generally closed, completely closed systems. But what you can do is take out components that are a part of that box to open the hole in it. So the main one that comes to mind is actually the blower motor, which you would have to take the glove box door assembly out, I believe, on Mark V's, and you can remove it from there. And that should, the blower motor is pretty big, and you should be able to at least get some reach in there to determine if you can get in there. And again, a magnet in that situation is going to help you too. You can kind of just fish it in there. If it's flexible, you might even be able to get a little bit more on it. So that would be my advice of going through that. If you cannot get it any of those ways, unfortunately, there may be some more components to take off. I can't really think of any that come to mind, and taking out the box completely might be the only option that's possible if you can't get it through those other methods. So that's a lot of work and easier said than done, so I don't recommend that being the route for most people to go.
Snowman via Vortex says, "I have tried with my dealer to convince them to change my oil in my 2016 GTI with 30,000 miles on it. Here's what I found out from them. There's nothing in their service books for changing of this fluid and does not show them how. Upon pressing them, they said they would change the fluid in my manual transmission, but VW considered that a lifetime component and did not need servicing. One person escalated the issue after I showed pictures and documentation from various links found in this forum and elsewhere. Escalation to a tech outside the dealership revealed that in the United States, the GTI Performance Pack Diff is not a serviceable part. Moreover, they stated that by changing the fluid in manual transmission, that would also change the fluid in the front differential."
Okay, this actually was left on the video that we shot explaining how the Performance Pack electronic limited slip differentials work. And in that video, I mentioned about the service interval, and then we also have a screenshot of that service interval that's recommended by VW. When this comment was left and said, "Hey, have you seen anything about this?" And there's a long thread from Vortex explaining it. I'll make sure I link to that in the description. But in that thread, there's a lot of people talking about how the dealer had, said they didn't know anything, whatever. And there's been comments from people that I've answered saying how a lot of times dealers and sometimes service advisors may not be well informed. So when I saw this, I started thinking like, okay, what document did I find that in? And I went to try to find that document, and I couldn't find it. It has been removed, it seems. And so what he's saying in regards to the dealer saying it's not a serviceable item would make sense given that information. Now, again, that information was pulled before something must have changed. And what I gather from the screenshot that I have, that I recall, and keep in mind, I don't remember, I certainly can barely remember what I did yesterday, never mind what I did on a video months ago, but that screenshot was pulled from the same place that I looked for this other one, but if you look at the top of it, it actually says a bunch of different models, and I'm pretty sure that before they had the US ones all set up, the US market was actually using the European in maintenance guide information. So that's why we had a document that used to exist that showed that being serviced, and then now it doesn't exist anymore, and they're using other documents that don't reflect that at all. What should you do? So the problem that I see in this circumstance is the Haldex fluid is identical. The Haldex pump is going to be basically the same on that differential versus a Haldex one that had on a Golf R, let's say, that has a service interval recommended. The only thing I would say is maybe they're saying that because it's possible that they believe because those limited slip differentials aren't going to engage a lot and maybe get a lot of use, and that's why they believe they don't need a service interval. As per Borg-Warner, and in some of the documentation I've heard them talk about this setup, they call it XDS or FXD. FXD, I believe, is FXD was what the terminology they used. But they actually recommended a service interval on that as well. So I would say if you are somebody who's engaging your clutch, or if you're somebody who's generally a vigilant owner, I would suggest servicing the Haldex stuff. So how to do that? We are looking to do a DIY. I've had a tough time scheduling or finding somebody who is local to us who has a Haldex car or a performance pack car to shoot a DIY on. It isn't really a complicated install. It's basically a drain and fill, much like old manual. If you look at our manual trans video, basically you fill up to the point where the fill hole is, and once it drains out, that's when you know it's full. There is also a checking procedure which requires it to be within a certain range of temperature, but it's a pretty wide range relative to what you would have found on, like, if for anybody who's familiar with the older auto trans cars like this, we're going to shoot a DIY on these cars for the automatic trans fluid, but the window for filling the fluid is much smaller. You know, this is like I think the Haldex one, or the performance pack instructions I saw had like a 40 or 50 degree window. So basically it just has to not be like super cold or super hot, and it was fine. So with that said, the filling procedure is super simple, and hopefully one day we'll be able to put something together and find somebody local who has one, and we can make that happen. One thing I forgot to mention yesterday when I was shooting was actually around the question around differential oil draining the Haldex fluid. So that's actually not the case. People oftentimes get confused about this if you're not exactly sure. It does depend on the transmission you're using as to whether the differential oil is separate from the transmission itself. On the standard automatic transmissions, generally what you would have is a transmission fluid and then a differential oil separate. In this case, it's going to be transmission oil, manual trans oil, which would, you know, like the Motul one we have that DIY on, and then the Haldex unit is separate. So the oil and clutch assembly from the Haldex system is completely separate from the actual manual transmission or differential oil itself. So it's going to be sealed off from each other. Draining one does not drain the other, and so that would be the case, and that they're not going to be mixed together, and that's not accurate.
T-Dog via YouTube says, 2006 GTI just came on yesterday. Airbag fault. I could probably get away with clearing the fault. I don't see why anything would break randomly after 116,000 miles.
All right, so this question was asked on the airbag video I shot recently talking about racing airbag lights. I did it with this car, but it really applies to all VW and Audi models. So this question is asking about clearing lights. So I mentioned in the video, and I guess maybe I wasn't clear or didn't explain it well. Clearing an airbag light, if you have an airbag light, any light of any kind, airbag light, check engine light, coolant light, whatever, 99% of the time it's because there's a problem. Lights don't just come on just for no reason. So if you were to, let's say, buy an OBD11, erase the light, it may not come back right away, but there's still an underlying problem and the reason why it came on, which is very, very likely, almost guaranteed, it will come back on. So in this circumstance, first you have to identify exactly what the fault is for. Airbag faults can come on for a multitude of reasons. Most commonly on a lot of cars, like, so for example, that car, probably clock spring related. If you have a driver's side airbag faults on that particular vehicle, it would be clock spring related, which is the thing that keeps the electrics connected when you're turning your steering wheel. So that's inside there. If those clock springs go bad, you'll have a light for driver's side airbag faults usually. If you have, like I mentioned in the video, like on this car and stuff that were common around this year, there was a problem with electrical connectors underneath the seat, and they would have kind of the back and forth motion would cause them to have bad connection. You'd have to cut out the connector or splice the wires together, and that would solve the problem around your connectivity issue. In that circumstance, you're going to have a passenger side seat airbag fault, the one that kind of sits right here in the bolster. So again, everything is going to be related to whatever the faults are for, but I would say almost certainly guaranteed that no airbag is going to be, and no airbag light is going to be fixed by just erasing it, unless you had a dead battery and the airbag light came on just saying that it had low voltage, but that's very unlikely. I don't think that's generally going to cause a light. So you definitely are going to want to look at actually fixing whatever the problem was with that vehicle.
Wingman via YouTube says, "Oh yeah, show people how to kill themselves. People don't do this yourself. Help us flat rate technicians and go to your local dealer."
Okay, so this comment was left on that same video of talking about airbag stuff. A couple things I wanted to talk about with this. First, in regards to the concern about people killing themselves, there is no way you're not going to kill yourself by erasing an airbag light on a vehicle. You certainly have some concerns around if you're working with airbags. I don't recommend everybody working with it, and he clearly didn't watch the video, because in the video I've specifically mentioned that if you're not sure of the steps to take to diagnose it, that to take it to somebody who's qualified to do so. So, and there's one thing that I think we don't get a lot of it, but I think there's a general feeling from most automotive technicians that us doing what we do or me doing what I do is bad for them. But frankly, to me, I feel like I'm a big supporter of dealer technicians in general. I used to be one. I understand what their life is like. I understand day-to-day stuff. I don't talk badly of dealers in general, although there are plenty of bad dealers out there. Dealers as a general whole, I don't see as bad. I think any business is the sum of the people who work there. So regardless of, if you think we're a good company, it has nothing to do with not just me, what I do, these videos, whatever, but the people who work with the company actually create a good experience for everybody else around there. That includes everybody who, packs packages, ships stuff, receives inventory, takes care of accounting stuff, takes care of customer service stuff. Everybody, makes up that thing. So the way I view dealerships is much the same. There are some terrible dealerships, and there are some great ones. So I try to make sure that I'm supporting any dealers and making sure that I affirm any of those things. And on the other side of that, even when I'm not necessarily funneling people into a dealer for that in those circumstances, and you're going to another shop, I view part of what I'm doing as affirming people's concerns around issues with their vehicle. So, a lot of times what I see is people have a concern with their car, they have a problem, they bring it to somebody to get fixed, whether it's a dealer or an aftermarket repair shop. And when they get either an estimate or anything in general, and especially even more so when it's very expensive, but in general, you're trying to verify that what you're being told is legitimate and the charges you're being told it costs are legitimate. And so what I view is as educating people as to preventing themselves from being taken advantage of, which as long as you're not taking advantage of people, I'm helping confirm that what you told them is true in the first place. So that's kind of the way I view a lot of what we do. And some people could say, the DIYs we have stop people from going to dealers or stuff like that. I also view that as a service to people who are our customers and the community in general. But more importantly, I view those people who are doing the work themselves probably as not generally people who would be going to a dealer to get their work done anyway. So, or even an aftermarket repair shop oftentimes. So with that said, thanks so much for watching episode 113 of the Askdap Show, where I answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. If you have any questions or comments about the questions answered in this show, be sure to leave in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe.